Wondering what the F has happened to your body and your life? You're in the right place, my friend. Welcome to Season 3 of Transforming 45, where we dive into the incredible stories of how brilliant humans are navigating the midlife squeeze with courage, passion, and a healthy dose of humor. Don't miss out on any of our heart-led episodes. Hit the subscribe button, leave a 5-star review, and if you're inspired, share an episode you love with a friend. It means more to me than I can express that you're choosing to spend time here and sharing our message of midlife revolution. So let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Transforming 45. I am really looking forward to this conversation. This week we have Beth Knight, who is an artist, an author, and a confidence and creativity coach. So Beth, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here. Words are hard.
I know. It is, as we are recording, it is a Monday morning, so I hear you. My oral muscles are just getting back into it as well. Oh, and that could go sideways really easily. So, all right. So Beth, who are you? And how did life introduce you to this version?
Wow. That's just a big question. Who am I? It's interesting because I just had my sister fly out. I'm in London, so I'm a painter. I just moved up from London to Glasgow to paint full time. I was a software developer for about 6 years, and that's how I ended up in the UK. And I've switched. I got my leave to remain so I could stay in this country, and now I'm painting full time. And I guess like my big claim to fame, it's a claim I made myself. I ran my giant nude painting in the London Underground about a year and a half. It was last March. So about a year ago, and that was super fun. I decided I wanted to be famous, and it was really cool. It was like a 16-foot giant painting of my naked body. And it was in the Bank Station, Waterloo, and Bond Street for 2 weeks. It was so cool. Here's one of the paintings that was in it, just looking over me.
Amazing.
Yeah. So who am I? I was a painter before I switched to tech. I switched to tech because I wanted like a stable job. I thought everybody making money. I was kind of disillusioned with art. And then I became disillusioned with tech. And I went back to painting, but this time when I went back to painting, it was a way because it had just been COVID. Like COVID had happened, and that was a real come to Jesus moment. I'm not religious, but I love that statement. So it made me really do a lot of deep therapy work, a lot of life coaching kind of stuff. I ended up getting certified in advanced feminist certification with Kara Lowenthal, who has a podcast that I was madly in love with. She's like a bigger woman who just was like, I'm not going to get smaller. I just love who I am. And I was like, that's not allowed. Yeah. And I kind of I saw this woman being confident, and I was like, I wish I could do that. And so I kind of just chased after her like a puppy. And it was during that certification that I started doing the paintings to get over my body dysmorphia. Because if you ever saw me, I'm not actually, I've never been fat. I've never been a big fat person. And but I thought I was. And that was really interesting. Just the stigma of even being remotely fat, or just how shamed we are for being in a larger body, or even thinking we're in a larger body. But just really, really working through my deeply internalized patriarchal beliefs through paint. And I do coaching as well, and it's mostly on creativity more than putting yourself out there. I love putting my art out there. I think I'm half painter, half performance artist, because I like to do stand-up comedy and put in my stuff on the line. I love that stuff. I'll do a friend show in Edinburgh here in about 2 months. We'll have my paintings up, and I'll do a talk every day.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I was coaching people on their body dysmorphia and things like that, but it's quite sad. It's quite depressing and sad. The people's story, and not that I don't want to help them with that. It's just heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking what women have had to go through. And I'm hoping that my paintings can help people, but I really love it because there's a step where as soon as you get rid of the body dysmorphia, you're like, well, what do I do now? You know, because there's so much time and energy that's just freed up, and mine turned into art and like really putting myself out there. Yeah, that's me. That's who I am.
Yeah. Do you think that it is I'm trying to put this question together and I'm not sure exactly how it's going to go. So let's see.
Yeah, I'm here for it.
Creativity and healing and creativity. What was the relationship of that for you?
Well, that they're entirely intertwined. Just in the way that you're like trying to formulate a question just there. Like I like visually explaining my thought process, including like the messy middle, right? Because it's not like I had this beautiful idea, here it is. It's like it's kind of poking and prodding and trying different things, and either or like writing out my thought process. I love to write out my thought process. I love to tie my writing with my painting and my comedy. Like I love like something like super sad tied to something really funny. That's my favorite. But it was healing because you're just kind of deeply questioning your thoughts. Like you're in these ingrained thoughts that you're like, this is truth. This is the truth of my life. And then you're like, no, it's not. Like, where did this come from? Oh my gosh. I remember like learning that like being larger was racist. So I was like, what? I mean, that's one aspect of it, but you're just like, man, there's so many levels to everything. And art is such a good way to explore like the messy middle gray area. And then sharing that and sharing the process, because I love sharing the messy part. I think the messy part's the most fun. So there's not like this perfect goal that I'm marching towards. It's just a constant dialogue with myself and others. Yeah.
I think that's really powerful. And I often talk about the messy middle as well. And I think the reality is the messy middle is it.
Yeah.
Like there really is there's really no end point until this ride that we're on is over, right? Like, yes, eventually the ride comes to an end and whatever comes next comes next. However, while we are here and living on this planet is constant messy middle. And I think part of all of our stories is that like colonial patriarchal notion of beginning, middle, and happy ending.
Yeah.
Very traditional story narrative that we all grew up with. But the reality is, sure, we have moments where like seeing your art in the tube stations, that's a great moment, but it's not the end, right? It's still leading to whatever the next messy middle is.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's getting excited about the next project. And yeah, you just fall in love with the messy middle. It's so, and I do think it's very like Disney kind of version of life where it's like, then you happily ever after. And once you realize there's no happily ever after, you're like, I think you do have to mourn the loss of that idea. You do have to be like, oh, like I don't have this idea anymore of like, and if I lose 5 pounds, my life will magically come together. That was like my driving narrative for decade. You know, you're just like 5 or 10 pounds, and when that happens, something magical happens, because there's always like an improved version of myself that would be finally happy. And when you're in the messy middle, you realize it's just you're chasing an emotion, like a feeling, right? Like, you know, in 10 pounds, I can finally feel happy, or I can feel content or satisfied. So honestly, I usually just felt hungry.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's realizing we're just constantly chasing emotions, and like you can feel those emotions wherever you are. And also like destigmatizing like negative emotions, like the ones that we're just I think of them as more complex emotions now, right? Like happy's easy, you know, sad's a little bit easy, and not easy, but it's just like I recognize it, but just that really sitting with yourself and feeling like what's going in my body. Because I would say I spent most of my life in my head, just kind of running away from myself, right? Because if you deeply dislike yourself in your body, you don't want to sit with it. You know, I was not, I just wanted to, and so art was a way to like, it was still an activity, so I could, you know, kind of channel it, but it was a way of, the closest I could get at that time to sitting still was writing and art. And now I can sit still, but I forgot where I was going with that.
That's okay. It'll come back around when it was meant to.
Yeah.
But I think that our art is sort of like moving meditation, right?
Yeah.
So it is this real, oh, sorry, I want to go back to what you were talking about living in your head, because that's a theme of a lot of episodes and conversation. Especially, I know you are not there yet. You're a bit younger, but in this midlife transition, when women have been living in our minds so much, and then our bodies literally like it's like a emergency braking system. That's kind of the way I'm
Yeah.
starting to look at perimenopause. It's like, bam, you can't keep living in your brain. It is essential that you get back into your body because there's stuff going on here that you need to pay health span and feel good. But it is that how one of the conversations I have a lot is, how do we drop from our brains back down into our bodies? And how did art help you to do that?
Well, first, I mean, because I was painting myself naked, so it was just kind of like I was studying, and not in a sexualized way, not like in this like nothing about my painting is sexualized. It's just like me as a person. I was just trying to get to that. It wasn't like a good person or a bad person, an attractive person, or it was just a person. That's the thought I was trying to get to, just being in my body. And so when you paint yourself, you have to really study yourself in a way that it's almost like I broke myself down into parts, like my actual parts. And you're studying them and you're like, well, it's not actually a bad arm, and it's just that's a stomach, and so it was a lot of just really looking at myself almost like scientifically. But by doing it, you there's no way you could stare at something that long without like falling in love with it, because it's just because you just can't. Like if I had painted an apple for 20 hours, I'd be like, best apple, you like you'd just be like, I just love it because I spent so much time really, really looking at myself. And then not in a way that's just like stupid body, it wasn't like, I can't wait for this to go away. Yeah.
That feels sort of revolutionary to me, because so much of the time we are really taught to not look at ourselves, right? It's part of that disconnection. It's the avoidance of if I don't look at myself and I don't really pay attention to this body, it's a lot easier to stay out of it. Like you said, when you really are looking at something. I had this moment a little while ago where often, like in the morning, I look at my face when I'm washing it and putting makeup on and that sort of thing. But I was like, I hadn't actually looked into my own eyes for I don't know how long.
Oh, wow.
And so I took a minute and I actually like spent time looking into my own eyes. And that was a moment of reconnection for me, where I was like, oh, geez, I have been so avoidant of really paying attention to myself. And so this idea of really studying ourselves, and that, when you spend that amount of time with something, it's impossible not to love it. That's a really beautiful and gentle way of doing some somatic reconnection.
I do think people look at themselves quite a lot, but they'll be like, like fix, I need to fix this. I need to fix this. So this is different. This was saying, I'm going to paint it exactly as it is without judgment. And that's a big piece, because I think people look at themselves quite a bit as a like, oh, wrong, 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 wrong. I think people look at them in the mirror all the time, or like I would do this too. I don't do it now, but take a bunch of photos, get rid of the ugly ones.
Yeah.
And that, you're studying yourself, because we've been taught as women that like our value is what we look like. And so you're like, I am not allowed to look bad.
Yes. Yeah. That is a very powerful driver for so many of us, is that, and I don't know that we often articulate it in that way of we're not allowed to.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, you'll be punished by society if you're just, you will be. And like, it's not like, even people who like love themselves deeply, if they're in a bigger body, they are treated differently. And so it's not just like, oh, it's crazy. Just love yourself. Like, no, there are repercussions
Yeah.
to loving yourself. Yeah. It's no joke. And I'll be the first to say, at least with myself, like I was never like so large that I was discriminated against. I did my own discrimination, but I was aware of it. I was aware of it.
Yes. Yeah.
And I remember like going on dating apps and being like, I have to wait until I look a certain way before I meet people. You're like, right?
Yeah.
Because then I'm a more valuable person on that app as opposed to just showing up as my human self. So,
Well,
yeah.
yes. And it sets up also the very colonial notion of the constant striving,
Yeah.
that we're never enough just as we are, that we constantly have to be looking ahead and striving for something. And that is where the value is. It's in the strive. It's not in the existing. And that has set up all kinds of really challenging themes and notions for all of us to have to work through. And so I'm wondering, like, so what was the experience for you when you saw, because I've looked at your art, it's beautiful.
Thank
It
you.
is deeply impactful because it is so honest and real. And it is very clear that you are looking at perspective that is not trying to artificially create a story. You are
Yeah.
objectively painting what is. And so what was the experience for you, like when you saw your work in the tube station? What was the impact of that for you?
It was so cool. My brain, I couldn't even comprehend it.
Yeah.
And it was, I didn't think they would let me do it. Was the first thing. That was the biggest. And when they finally let me do it out, because it's a lot of covering, I would run down every day and go look at it. This is so cool. This is so cool. And like stand in front of it and be like, oh, does anybody else? That's me. Which it never happened. Like people on the tube probably barely looked up at it, but it meant a lot to me. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was such a cool moment. And it kind of changed. It made me realize what was possible, right? It kind of, when you realize that there's no rules, that I mean, that one was also not just that it was my body, but it was me making the statement like, I want to be an artist. I want to be a big famous artist. Look at me. That was kind of what that was. Like, look at me. Because I remember thinking, I was like, oh, I was thinking about Banksy because I was like, when I did the paint, so I did the paintings, worked through all the issues, and I was like, okay, how do I become famous? It was just like, because when you start to unshame yourself, there's so much energy and power and authentic like desire underneath all that. And we are keeping a lid on it. At least I was trying so hard to control my body that there was something else in there that wanted to be big and wanted to be loud and out in the public. And it was like,
Uh-huh.
well, and when you lose 10 pounds or whatever, and when that's gone, you're just like, oh, I really want to take up space. I really want to take up space and be loud and obnoxious and, like a little kid on a stage I mean, that for me, other people have other things come out, but that's what came out of me was that not only did I not want to be small, I wanted to be very large, very loud. Like I do stand up comedy now. That's really fun.
Yeah.
Uh, and I remember with stand up comedy, I would so you record yourself doing it and then you watch it back. And I remember that was so hard for me for so long because I was like, oh, my voice, oh, the way I look, you know? And now I just do it all the time. And I'm like, ah, it's fun. I just see the way I see myself now is the way you would see like a niece or a nephew, right? Like a child, where it's just like, oh, I love them. That's great.
Yeah.
Which is
That
mind boggling. You adapt pretty quick. You think it takes a long time, but like once you get the green light, your brain's like, oh, thank God, this is so much easier.
right?
Yeah.
Yes, this is so much easier. There are so many things you said. Like, okay, let's go back and like talk about this piece. But now I have to get my brain to focus on which one to go back to first. But keep thinking about just how powerful your self reconnection is, that you can see yourself in all your honesty naked in a tube station. Like that is an incredible statement of reclamation of your body, your soul, and to really stand in that feeling of love,
I
of
think
like,
I have to be honest here. I think the thought was more like look how talented I am.
Ah, okay.
I think I got over the whole like look at my body. I mean, it was cool, but I was also like, that's a really well done painting. Look how talented. There was an absolute monster underneath all that shame.
I don't know if that's monster or if that's just truth. Like being able to claim what we're really good at is um it's a really powerful way to shift the way your mindset, right? It's like that green light of, oh, this is so much easier. You know,
Uh-huh.
people will ask me a lot, like, do you listen to your own podcast? I'm like, yes, I
Yeah.
do. Because when I am in it, like when I'm having the conversation, I'm present in the moment and I don't get to listen to it the way a listener would. So of course I go back and I listen, and I love listening to the conversation and the way that it unfolds. And then I have the opportunity of being both. It's an interesting perspective. And I think art maybe is similar as well, especially when you're doing things like painting yourself,
Uh-huh.
because you get to have the process of creation, but
Yeah.
then also the perspective of someone who is standing back and looking at it.
Yeah. It's fun. Making stuff is so fun. It's so
Yeah.
fun. It's so
Yes.
fun. Everybody should do it.
Yeah. And the idea of fun, and that is where I think creativity, the conversation around creativity is so important. We take these weird lives that we're living so damn seriously.
Yeah.
And the truth is, this life experiment that we're doing is just really absurd. Like it is the most absurd thing you could possibly imagine. And so instead of being so wrapped up in the seriousness of it, fun and creativity is what makes you actually present
Uh-huh.
and be able to accept, I think, the absurdity of it in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah, it is quite. I think I'm an absurdist, maybe nihilist, something like one of those. I'm one of those, but I love
Yeah.
it because like it drives my family nuts. Oh man, because it like I just feel like I'm on an adventure and I'm just seeing and I'm learning skills along the way and I'm seeing where it takes me.
Yeah.
And when you have people who like to follow a script, you know, because I didn't get married or have kids or have a house or I just quit my job and it's just kind of like, well, what are you doing? You're like, we just moved to Glasgow because I think Scotland sounds fun.
Yeah.
And it is. It's really fun. And I there's really good painters here. Like I am setting myself up to be around creative people who I know will like push me more creatively because that's what I want. But I don't know where it's leading, and it is really fun. And I think at this stage of my life, it's all possible because I'm not obsessing about what I look like. It's funny for somebody who painted themselves a lot. Like it's the last thing I think about. It's I like when I wake up in the morning. I'm usually when I get ready. I'm like, good enough. You know, I don't.
Yeah.
Um, which that wouldn't have been possible a few years ago. I don't think so. You know, you would have
Uh-huh.
been really, really concerned about how you're presenting yourself to the world, and now it's more of like it's easier for me to like listen to people and get to know people because I'm not like what are they thinking of me? You know, like I don't, do they like me? What about me? And you're like, okay,
Mhm.
like I just get to be a human in the world, and it's so freeing. And then I get to go be creative and play, but I'm not thinking about myself all the time. Well, I guess I'm thinking about my passions and interests, but I'm not like not my shame based attributes that pretty much dictated most of my life.
Yeah. Well, and you're not so dependent on the external, right? You're not looking for external validation as much
Uh-huh.
because you have done a lot of really deep internal acceptance.
Yeah, it isn't because I do get on stage and do tell jokes, and if they don't laugh, I'm like, but I don't take it you know, like I'm like, okay, bye.
Yeah. But that's I think that also is part of creativity, is part of the
Oh yeah,
process, right? Because we're creating things, especially when you're doing something like comedy, it is inherently interactive.
yeah,
You don't tell jokes hoping that people are going to just sit there and not respond, right?
yeah,
Like it is an interactive medium and an interactive relationship. And podcasting is like that too, right? Like if I do it because I love it. And I am like, I get to talk to brilliant humans all the time. Like, what a gift that is.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I also am disappointed when, not a lot of people listen to an episode because there's time and love that goes into each piece that you want other people to experience and feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting because in terms of like reach and everything, I think it's more of like a way that it's not like luck or anything. It's the way it's presented to people. Like if the best people aren't necessarily reaching the most people, right? It's maybe if you package it in the correct way, people get it or whatever. But that's not really that's one of the reasons maybe that I've made that I don't get worked up over if people like it or not. Because I've had things like go viral on one platform and get like 2 likes on another platform, and you're like, there's no like, it's all arbitrary, So yeah, that was more of like saying that the quality of your work and like the validation are completely not tied together.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, thank you. That was a good articulation between like the validation and just you wanting people to experience what you've created.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not really about the number, but it is about knowing that people are experiencing, because when you're creating art, you are pouring your heart and soul into whatever it is that you're creating, which is a palpable feeling, right? And that's going back to, I also loved what you were talking about fame and wanting, and really it's about being seen and letting people feel what you like, the love and the care and the passion and the creativity that you put into something, which is very different from using fame as validation.
Yeah. I mean, it would be a nice, you're like, I think I've always wanted to sell something for like 100 million and then be like, I got the check mark. But then I would just be like, and then I'd get permission to call myself an artist or whatever. But really, you just decide whatever you want to call yourself. And then you go from there because you like rise to the challenge of that. Like, I remember because I was a software developer and I was always an imposter because I went to a boot camp and I could care less now. I hate that industry so much. But they're like, you're not good enough to be in this room, and you're like, probably I don't want to be there. But what I really like you decide what you want to try to pursue, and then you kind of have to put blinders on almost and like go for it. But I will say the biggest thing that's helped me with all of this is all the de-shaming work I've done because I'm allowed to make a fool of myself publicly, and it doesn't mean anything about my value as a person.
And what was your process for that? Because I know that it's
So
something that a lot of
much.
people are working toward. And it is not easy, right?
I will say, I mean, I was relentless. I was relentless, and I got so much coaching and therapy. I think so. Therapy is more like you're dealing the traumas of the past or whatever, and I think coaching is more of like you're working towards a bigger, brighter future version of yourself. And I think the two go really well together. Like they balance each other because you don't want to just be stuck in the past. You're like, oh, okay, we get it. Mom didn't have emotional intelligence. Okay, we get it. But I do like the two of them together. So a lot of that. And I like to work with a lot of different people. So it wasn't just like one coach. There was a person. I like to have lots of different conversations with different people, especially different cultures. That's very important to me. To not just get one type of person that I'm talking to. Because I don't want to create an echo chamber of just like validate me, validate my experience. I'm great. And because coaching actually can be quite hard because good coaching will really put you in the hot seat and be like, is that true? And you're like, it's true. And they're like, is it? And you're like, essentially it's a Socratic method, right? Where you're just deconstructing your thoughts and you're like, is this thought serving me or is it not? But a lot of what was underneath most of my thoughts was that I just fundamentally wasn't good enough or worth it. And that was a heartbreaking thought that I chipped away at. And it took years. It took years. And I would say I am through it. And I'm sure there'll be things that come up and challenge me later. I think I was talking to somebody about the terms of like my body, I was like, I would probably struggle with aging. That's the next one. But I'm going to use my art. I already have like the tools in place to like not deal with, like to experience that experience and really like
Mhm.
dive into it. Yeah. So, years of self inquiry. How about that? That's how you get over shame. A lot of
Yeah.
and putting yourself out there. You have to put yourself out there and realize you're not going to die, right? Because
Yeah.
your brain's like, we're going to die if we do this, and everyone will hate it. And I will be the first to say, my family hates what I'm doing. They hate my art. They hate what I'm doing. And at first it was like, oh, this breaks my heart. But now it's like, of course they hate it. Everything I'm doing is questioning the values I grew up with. Why would they like it?
Yes.
Why? It deeply questions the values I was raised in. Like, what do you think? They'd be like, good job.
Yes, I
So,
know.
but now I can sit. I mean, it's still a struggle because they're very adamant, but it's not. I don't take it on. It's their stuff. It's not for me to take on personally.
Yes. And that is one of the, I think that can be one of the hardest pieces is the separating out of my story is mine
Yeah,
and your story is yours. And just because something is happening in mine doesn't value or devalue what is happening in yours.
yeah,
And when you're able to kind of do some of that separating out, it can be really liberating. But because we are taught, and I mean, we like as humanity, we are all interconnected, we are all intermeshed, but because, oh, and maybe this is connected to, it's all connected to shame in so many ways,
uh-huh.
right? Like if we haven't done the work and we feel shame because someone else is having a different experience than we are, then all it's doing is lighting up the shame, which doesn't
Yeah,
make room for celebration of other
yeah.
people, right?
I trigger shame people so much. I know I do it now. I'll talk to people who they're like, you can't do that. Like you can't do that. And I'm like, I already did it. And they're like, no, get
Yeah.
back. It's like if you heard like was it the lobsters in the bucket or the crabs in the bucket? Like a
Oh,
crab
yeah.
tries to
Trying to pull
crawl
them
out.
back down.
They're like, that's not fair. We have to feel shame, so you have to feel shame. And I'm like, no, I don't want to go back.
Yeah.
You can't shame me. I mean, you could try. I would probably just turn it into a joke.
Yeah. And that's a really powerful space to come from because then not only are you living in a space that feels more free, where you can just be who you are,
Uh-huh.
but you also get to show that leadership of, and this I think is where a lot of the resistance comes because you are showing, actually, guys, you don't have to live that way,
Yeah.
right?
No,
Like,
we're so
yeah,
deeply shamed as women. It comes at you from all the angles. It's just relentless and it's not right. It's
no.
like that.
I
Yeah.
know. And I'm like, when you were talking about aging being the next challenge, it sure is. And I live in the menopause, perimenopause space. That is the work that I do.
Uh-huh.
And I will say, like, I have this internal battle all the time around, oh, just be, right? Like, it's okay. This is the process. And then the other side of it is, yes, and I also want to feel, I want to look the way I feel on the inside. And I want to continue to feel vibrant because I am vibrant on the inside. I am wise.
Yeah.
I have wisdom. I'm vibrant. I am creative. I'm all these things. And I want that to be expressed. And so there's this like push and pull of, no, just let your hair go gray, Lisa. Like, it's really not a big deal. And then the other part of me pushing against that with all my might, because it's like, but that's not what I feel like on the inside.
Yeah.
And so it's a complex mix of loving who you are
Hmm.
and then deciding. And I think maybe that's where it is the deciding and making sure that the decisions are coming from inside rather than what other people expect of us.
I mean, I love complex questions like that, and that's where I would just make a painting or write about it. Because it is I mean it is I like that struggle. I like the struggle of like, oh, I want it to not even matter, but it does matter. And you're like, that's so human. That's so
Yes.
human, right? And even like wanting to be like, I don't even care. Like even that's human because you do deeply care. You don't want society to like shun you or whatever.
Hmm.
Uh, and so those are the kind of questions I really look forward to. Or like I would even dig into why we shame women so much about aging, because
Yes.
I would probably go there next. Yeah, I would just own up to everything I'm feeling, all of it. I'd spill it out on the
Uh-huh.
internet. I'd be
Uh-huh.
like, I low key want to get Botox or whatever, which actually I don't because I don't like needles.
Yeah, and it is that again going back to that choice, because someone will blah, again words. Some women will make that choice for themselves because that feels good to them for whatever reason.
Uh-huh.
And part of the work for me actually was letting go of judgment around that. It's like
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well,
you,
women will keep each other in place like no other. But
yeah,
they, well,
and-
that's why I say like the shaming. It's not just like no, get in line. Like we just we don't need men to police us because we do it pretty good.
yeah. We are so because we are so deeply hard. We are so hard on ourselves,
Yeah.
right? And then we project that out, and it is that like it is so freeing when you can get to the place of like, well, that is what that person wants to do. It's their body,
Yeah.
so they get to choose it. And in a time where our bodily autonomy is under attack,
Oh yeah.
the more that we can just say to each other, your body, you get to decide,
Uh-huh.
the more freeing it is. And it is a release of shame. The thing about women and aging is as literally as old as time, right?
Yeah.
Because we are told that women's value is when you are reproducing.
Yeah.
And when you get on the other side of reproduction, you don't have that much value anymore. And then it's the march to death,
I guess
really.
I've hedged my bets a little because as an artist, you just get better with,
Yeah.
right? You get better as an artist the older you get. So I've kind of like, not all my eggs are in the back, but that's still external stuff. That's still external stuff, right?
I don't know. It isn't though, because I feel like when you were an artist, when you were creating things that are coming from the internal out, it is part of who you are. And when you said, I just keep getting better, the real truth is that so do we.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody actually is just getting better in different ways.
Yeah.
And so when we're able to acknowledge that about ourselves, there's transformation that can happen there.
I guess I'm a little bit not lucky, but so I'm 39. You could not pay me to be in my 20s. You can. Maybe with like my mindset now, but if you're like you've got to redo the experience of 20s, but like with your 20-year-old mindset of the world, I'd be
Yeah.
like, oh, she was not happy. She was not happy.
Yeah.
I do not want to return to there. But I have other friends who, they were young and happy and free and beautiful in their 20s. They're quite sad right now as we get older. And I was like, you're losing something. I'm
Yeah.
not, I'm not losing. Like, oh no, no more of that.
Huh,
uh,
okay.
yeah. So
I
I actually,
think, sorry, go ahead.
oh, it was just, yeah. Like if you feel like you're losing something, that's when it really, really hurts.
It does. And some of the healing work that I am engaging in and trying to lead people through also is knowing that, like, there were painful parts, but there were some great parts too. Like, the example I always use is like, I loved being 16 and 17 for all kinds of reasons. I loved that time in my life. And to your point of like, I did feel like I was losing that for a long time. But now I'm at a place where I can recognize that girl still exists within
Uh-huh.
me. And I get to bring her forward and we can merge and have like the best of the fun and the freedom and the newness and the excitement that existed then with the grounded wisdom, lived reality and experience. And that is actually how we keep getting better, is we just keep bringing the best of ourselves with us.
Yeah, that's true. I do think you can have like an old mindset. Like I meet people who are like, "Oh, my back," and I'm like, if you just keep talking like that, like I'm more excited than ever.
Yeah.
Like I put people to shame in terms of energy and like passion.
Yes.
Like get out of my way, like it's your mindset, right?
100%.
And you do get so much energy back when you're not shaming yourself. Like oodles. I mean,
Yeah.
if I could just wave a magic wand and give all women somewhere that gift, because then you like wake up and you're like, oh my God, because you'll step into your power. You step into your power and you're like, off we go to run companies and countries.
Right.
Instead, we're like, oh, time to disappear and get Botox. And you're like, what? That's not what guys
Yeah.
do. That's not what they do. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
look at Trump. He's
Oh
like,
God.
but I mean, like, what kind of delulu does that man have that he's like, I should be president again? And like, we told you no.
Yeah.
And,
And
but,
yet,
but I want that for women.
I want that for women too.
Right? We're
Especially,
like the confidence of a mediocre white man.
oh, that's what I say that all the time, if
Yeah.
only. But it's interesting because I was just having the same conversation with my acupuncturist on Friday about like Trump has devastating impacts and at the same time is a fascinating study in all of the things that we can learn around, yeah, when you have full belief in yourself that you can do whatever you want, you can.
Yeah. And
It,
you'll ruin your family and the country, but gosh, you'll achieve your dreams. So
yeah,
he he's
yeah,
just not care.
I
But
know.
it is true. It is true though, right? Like because he sees himself getting better, and that's just because he chose to. He chose to think that, and the world agreed with him because it's built to agree with him. And so women you have to put in more effort and that's why I like coaching and things
Yes,
like that because it just okay. Let's really talk about this. Let's really dig into it. And I have
yeah,
a very strong community of women who help me with my mindset. Like I have that
yeah,
whole advanced feminist group. I've got those. I've got my friends are all like really strong, powerful women. I'm
yeah,
really selective with my friends. Like, I'd rather just hang out by myself than around a person who's going to like drop my energy, which sounds quite selfish, but you kind of
yeah,
have to be. You kind of have to be.
uh-huh, yeah.
Also, I really
I-
enjoy my own company. It's like it's really
yeah.
fun. I'm a
I've
blast.
started. I know. I've started reframing selfish to full of self.
Uh-huh.
Like I am so full of myself that I'm good. Like that is what needs to be. I am living in my body. I should be full of myself and not
Yeah.
making myself smaller or that any of those things are selfish.
Let's say if somebody calls you selfish, I'm like, do you want me to think about you? That's selfish. You're selfish. You want me to think about you? You're selfish.
I know. Let's just make space for you to think about yourself. And then
Yeah. The
that
concept of
would be
being a
great.
woman who deeply loves and cares for herself it's you are going to bump up against society because it's everything is geared towards telling you you're not. Then
Yes.
get in line, be a dutiful wife, mother, something, sister.
Mm-hmm.
Don't make waves. Just and it is hard. It is like I won't. I'd say it flippantly, but it was really hard to have my family be like, "Why would you do that?" My sister said,
Mm-hmm.
"My sister said my images." She's like, "You put porn in the underground," and I was like, "It's not porn. Porn
No.
makes money."
Also, the human body, it's a shift. Again, going back to shame, right? It's viewing the human body as porn is a function of shame. The human
Yeah,
body is art.
yeah, and also, I mean, like, what are your kids gonna do when they're like in an art gallery or like looking anyway? But
Yeah.
it is, it's so it's I constantly get coached on things like this. It's not like I'm saying it flippantly, like, oh, I'm perfect. No, I get coached relentlessly
Yeah.
on my mindset.
And thank you for being honest about that because sometimes when we're practitioners, it can sound like we have all the answers. And yes, we have lots of tools, and we still need to give ourselves the same care that we are providing for other people. And that is really important because life continues to happen, right? You don't arrive at the destination of healed. It's like I have healing experiences and I continue to live, which means I continue to need healing experiences.
Yeah. And just self-care and leaning on a tribe and being, I even think you can use things like TikTok to your advantage if you don't have, because like I will say coaching is expensive. It's hard to get access to. It's a privilege. If you do something like TikTok, you can kind of create like an echo chamber of just building yourself up, which is why, like you like things that start to like put that message to you again and again. So my TikTok is just like such a cheerleader. Like you turn it on, it's like, you go girl, you're amazing. I'm like, thank you, TikTok. I mean, you can use it to like build yourself up, or not, if you're going to be mindlessly scrolling, you might as well make that content. It's a great way to reprogram your brain. I think it's a great tool if you know how, if you use it wisely.
Yes, when you're using it consciously to make those choices.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I made them consciously, but then when I'm unconsciously scrolling, it's already set in motion.
It's there.
So it's like, I just have all these people I follow who are deeply inspired by, and I just catching up on what they're doing. And I love it.
Yeah. And again, because you have that space to be able to cheer for other people because you have liberated yourself from that shame cycle.
And I will say, I used an artist named Ginny Savo, who, spoiler, she lived in Glasgow and went to school up here. It's one of the reasons I'm up here. I'm kind of chasing after people I admire. Even though she's not here, she's in Oxford, and that's quite creepy of me. I looked at her work, and she did it when she was 20. She did a nude self-portrait, and I was like, oh, to have the guts to be able to do that. And I saw that a decade ago, and like tucked it away in the back of my mind. It's like, I thought it was a special type of person who was like that brave. And then I'm that person. But sometimes it's not going to happen right away. You see things and they inspire you, and you're like, someday, and it does happen. It does. There's no time limit.
Thank you so much for this conversation.
Yeah.
I feel like we could keep going, but right. I'm going to make sure that all of Beth's links are in the show notes. So check out her art, check out her work, and feel all of the love and care and lack of shame that Beth is putting out into the world. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Beth.
Bye.
Thank you for being part of the Transforming 45 community. Your support means the world to us. Stay tuned for more juicy episodes, and remember to keep showing up to your life with the love and magic you deserve. Until next time.
Electricast.